There's not just one way to solve a problem at Blue Chip. We plan, build, and test until we find the most effective solution.
We strive to make ourselves and our clients more successful. We are driven to be the best.
We are driven to compete.
We are driven to partner.
We are driven to collaborate.
We are driven to deliver.
All right. Hello, everybody. Thanks for joining us this morning. Excited to share some work we've been doing at the J.M. Smucker Company. So let me start by introducing myself. I'm Chris Reiner. I lead the centralized data science team at the J.M. Smucker Company. Domiciled in our IS department, which is kind of our IT group. And for those who may be familiar with our products, we make Smucker's Jam and Jelly. We also have Jif peanut butter, some coffee brands, including Folgers, Uncrustables, which is kind of like a pre-made peanut butter jelly sandwich, and then some pet brands, Rachel Ray Nutrish, Kibbles and Bits, Meow Mix, 9 Lives, and then also Milkbone dog biscuits. So today we'd like to share some work we've been doing with our manufacturing facilities, leveraging computer vision. It was great seeing the presentations yesterday, some other presentations as well, leveraging images, and that's what we're going to dive in today. So to start, you're looking at the theme of the conference, the data to decisions. So data is everywhere, and I think we saw that yesterday, right? Like lots of unexpected places that we see data in our day-to-day lives, and then how we can leverage them, with the work that we all do. With those data, as we did see yesterday, a lot of those transformations are required to turn that data into insights for ourselves and our project as well. Sometimes having that data is not enough. We need to create extra data or additional data to really get the insights out, and that's what we're going to explore a little bit here today. And then finally, that new data, that insight, that needs to be available at the right place at the right time in order for the decision to occur, right, to capture that business value. So that's our kind of data to decision to business value. So beginning with the end in mind, we're going to start with kind of what was made, kind of what does this completed system look like, and then we're going to start at the beginning and kind of work through how we got here. So what the project ultimately created was an automated second pass check to identify and save some product at one of our manufacturing facilities. So for the purposes of this presentation, we're going to be discussing this in terms of fruit, but it was one of our products. So coming out of the manufacturing process, there was an optical inspection of that product. And then a determination was made, should we ship this to our consumers? Mostly around kind of some of the aesthetic qualities, right? Did it form? Did it form the correct way? That we were hoping, in order to send it to consumers. And if no, then we would send it to scrap. But if yes, then we would sell it to consumers like myself and everyone else. If no, then we save those images into a database. We use those images to create a computer vision model, computer vision algorithm, to look at the contents of that picture and say, well, what was in that image? From there, we created 2 dashboards. One is a real-time kind of streaming dashboard on the manufacturing floor to kind of show in real time, what is occurring with the scrap in this particular part of the manufacturing process. And another one is a more interactive one that involves kind of facilitates supports this long-term analysis, long-term planning. Has availability to all the real-time data as the streaming one does, but it's more geared towards some of that kind of Q&A, kind of hey, we made a change, what occurred, sort of type question and answer process. And then finally, we introduced an override step. So if our algorithm, if our model says, hey, this was good fruit, this was good product, well, let's override sending it to scrap, and let's actually continue to pass it forward and sell it to consumers. So this end-to-end is ultimately what was created in this project. So, so starting at the beginning, we were asked by some folks, hey, we're looking at some camera technology, there's some computer vision applications that we could do with this. So we were asked to go down to one of our manufacturing facilities and kind of investigate this. And throughout the day later on, we went around kind of the manufacturing floor itself and looked at kind of the process and all the steps and everything else. And we noticed that there was one particular part after this optical inspection that some of this fruit here, right, was scrapped. And it got us asking the question of, well, we think we know how many are in here, right? The system kind of keeps track of number of rejections, but we don't really know why. There's not really a way to determine what is the contents in this scrap bin. What are the reasons like this fruit is here? So what that information will be extremely valuable to the engineers and the technicians working there to try to understand what's occurring in this part of the manufacturing step in the process. Fortunately, it was already kind of set up that when fruit here was rejected, that image was retained in kind of a rolling, last however many so kind of fashion. So we did have some of those images available. So as you can see here, though, that is the data, right? That's where the data is. It's these images, right? So now we need to unlock the contents of these images in a way to get this information to the folks who can make the best changes with knowing what's occurring here. So we're going to take a step back from the process real quick, and we're going to talk about just working with images first. So we're going to compare two pictures of fruit real quick, and we're going to determine, how are these visually different? How would we determine that these two fruit are different from each other? So we're going to start out with a strawberry and a banana. So I know we all kind of have mental models, right, of these two fruit, right? Based on all of our senses, we know how they, what the texture, if we touch them, what the taste of them are, the smell of them as well. But putting all that aside, just purely looking at these two pictures of these two fruit, how would we determine that these are different? Just with these images, how do we determine these are different? And let's think about that for a second. How would we do this? And so this one, it may be a little bit more obvious. They're different colors, right? And this would be easy. If we were to tell a computer, hey, tell these two fruit apart, we say, well, this one's yellow and this one's red, right? So that feels good. We can determine these two apart from each other. Well, now, let's look at our strawberry here against another red fruit. So this time, let's do a tomato. So how would we tell a computer, which doesn't have access to any of the other sensors, just purely looking at these images, how are these different? Like, what are we going to use to determine these are different? So let's take a second, kind of pause and ponder that. How are we going to tell a computer these images have different things in them? And I think probably the quickest way would be something around the shape, something around roundness. The tomato is more round than the strawberry. And so if we think about this, we're trying to tell a computer, hey, these are different because they have different shapes, right? But these are two particular images of two particular fruit. Let's take like a bigger picture kind of thought around this is how would we tell a computer to tell any picture of any strawberry that is a different fruit from any picture of any tomato? How do we do this at scale, right? Where anything could be, basically told apart from each other. How do we tell a computer to generalize that problem? So let's keep going through this exercise of so now we have our strawberry. Now let's do something that's a little bit more similar to a strawberry. Let's say like a raspberry, right? So now we have color, right? From how we determined the banana is different from the strawberry. Now we kind of have shape, right? So that's how we tell, the tomato is different from the strawberry. But how do we tell a raspberry is different than the strawberry? Purely on the visual contents of these pictures. And again, any strawberry from any raspberry, right? Because they're pretty similar shape, they're pretty similar colors. Right, so how do we do this? So this one is now we're getting very specific, right? So here there's something specific to strawberries. Maybe it's a particular part of the shape, maybe it's the seeds or something like that. It's very particular to strawberries, right? So now we're getting very specific to our fruit identification. So kind of last one of these examples. Let's go strawberry to an unripened strawberry. So I do a little bit of a color filter here, but strawberry to an unripened strawberry. How do we tell these two are different, right? Because now the shapes are the same and the specifics to the strawberry are the same, but there's something about like ripeness, maybe it shows up in the color or something else that would say, hey, these two are different, right? So we want to be able to say the image on the right is still a strawberry. And we want to be able to say that, but we also want to say it's different than like the good strawberry or the ripe strawberry, right? So now we're getting very specific and really trying to hone out on these differences, right? So how do we do this? How do we work with the computer and the algorithms to put all of this together, right? And so the main key here is that images themselves are data, right? So if we look at this image of the strawberry that we've been looking at, and we overlay a grid, you can see that there's pixels, right? And obviously the grid sizes are much larger than an individual pixel, but just to kind of show the representation on top of it. So, you know, there's pixels within this image, and that is the data point, right? Each pixel knows where it is and some value about it. So here, color, right? And so if we looked at that particular pixel that we've drawn a circle around, we can see there's aspects about it. Where is it located? What color is the pixel? Right, so that's where the data is an image is a matrix of numbers, right? And that's kind of the step, right, to working with this image data. You know, as we heard yesterday, images are unstructured data, right? There's lots of types of unstructured data. Text is another classic example, sound as well. But images are unstructured. And what does that mean? What does it mean to be unstructured data? Well, it means that it doesn't fit nicely into rows and columns, right? So you don't have your standard database table of, you know, columns of saying I'm looking at these metrics, and the rows are your observations, and you know, the cells are your values of those observations. That doesn't really work for images in this way. The key is that the pixels, the information in the pixels, they are spatially related. So what occurs on either side of a single pixel is relevant to what's occurring within the pixel, right? So if we looked at this row, the way we might frame that up is okay, well, we have this table of it, but now we're losing some of the spatial relationship if we turn it into this rows and columns format, because what happens with the row above or the row below, that's still important to understanding the total context of what's going on in that image. So let's talk about now how would we determine our strawberry is different than our tomato, right? So, you know, we probably want to code up some rules about color differences, maybe shapes, so we can figure out a way to describe roundness. You know, we'd have to code that up into some sort of rule. But think about the number of if-else statements, right? Just even if you were to talk out loud, like what that would look like. Think about the number of if-else, like, well, if I see this, then I do this, and if I see this otherwise, then I do this other thing. The amount of manually created rules would be enormous, right? To be able to even differentiate a strawberry from a tomato. It'd be a huge amount of manual rules and take forever to write those, right? So we ended up using an algorithm called a convolutional neural network. So this is it's a deep learning algorithm, it's a supervised learning algorithm, and we're going to dive into that in a little bit. How fully how it works is a little bit outside you know, the total scope of this talk, but in general, what it does is it retains kind of the spatial relationships within the pixel. So we have the pixel and also kind of looks at all the pixels around it as well. And so that's the algorithm that we ended up using, is this convolutional neural network. So, okay, great. So now we have our images. Those are the data. Now we have our algorithm, our convolutional neural network. Let's go get insights from it, right? Well, there's still another step, because remember, it's a supervised algorithm, right? So when we say we train the model has to learn. We have to come up with an answer key for it, so it has something to learn from. So before we can get started getting those insights out, we have to generate more data. And so that's creating these labels. We need to tell the algorithm, hey, when you see this picture, this is what's occurring in this picture. So we have to go make even more data before we can start getting the insights out from the data. So now we have decision time. So we have our you know, where we started from our initial setup. We now have our computer vision algorithm trained. When an image is, when fruit here is rejected, we now call the algorithm. And then from there, we power our dashboards, as we saw earlier. The key here is that those dashboards are still hugely valuable and can generate lots of value on their own. In fact, you know, even as recent as a couple weeks ago, there was an at this manufacturing facility, they noticed, hey, we seem to have a lot of rejections for a particular reason, and we think maybe there's something, the manufacturing process we can change. What could we do? And so, so they determined something mechanical that they want to change about. They're like, oh, but that may introduce more rejects for a different reason. So we may introduce more air into the system. So they made the change, they tracked the results and found not only did it reduce the total scrap, it reduced the air they were targeting, but did not introduce more air in another location, right? So this dashboard allowed them to determine that the changes they made were correct and specifically targeted what they were targeting without introducing extra like rejections into the system. So even on its own, that for analytics, a lot of what we do is build dashboards. And here then later, we'll plug the model into the manufacturing line, but even that is still really beneficial, and we can still get a lot of value out of that. And it's a lot of annual cost save, which is great. So from here, there was another interesting insight in the data. As you can see here, there were a couple somewhat occasionally occurring, not a whole lot, but every so often we would see, hey, some of these fruit here were good and they were scrapped, and maybe there was like a shadow in the image or something like that. And so what could we do about that? And so what we determined was that we could go back to the system, and now we're going to revisit kind of our starting point here, and say, well, can we introduce an override step, right? So rather than the first check saying, yep, we're going to scrap it immediately, can we introduce an extra check in the system and say, well, if the computer vision algorithm says, hey, this is actually good, there was a shadow or something like that, still send it to consumers. And so that's what we ended up building and installing into this manufacturing line. And that alone is just a huge feat of machine learning engineering and DevOps. You have milliseconds from the time that the image is taken, call the model. You have to mechanically move or not move something on the manufacturing line, depending on, do you reject it, do you override it, in just milliseconds, end to end on that process. And so, it's very, very quick kind of windows you have to operate in there. But ultimately, this is what was fully built for this manufacturing system, or manufacturing plant, sorry. And so that was the whole project. That's the project end to end. If we look at kind of revisiting this theme and kind of where some of the themes of this year's event show up, data is everywhere, right? We said that's images, right? That's our unexpected data. Those are our images. We want to make those transformations, but we need to create additional data to do that, right? We need to tell the algorithm, we need to give it an answer key. This is what you should be expecting to see. So that's our computer vision model and our labels. And then finally, we need to get that insight, that new data, to the right people at the right place at the right time to make those decisions, right? And so that's our real-time dashboards, and it's also our direct integration with the manufacturing line. So with that, I just want to say thank you to everyone. Thank you to the University of Akron, all the sponsors, the other speakers as well for this conference. Really excited to participate. Thanks to the team who worked on this project, our manufacturing facility, our engineering team, our research and development team, and the data science team who worked on all this. Thanks for everyone for joining today and for listening to this presentation.